Hello, fellow comic book worms. This is NammaN. Welcome to my channel. We have Otaku here, my co-host, and we have our guest, Chris from Bronze Age Nerd.
Hey
Please,
guys.
please, Otaku, help introduce him or however we
Yeah.
work this out.
So yeah, we've been meaning to have Chris on for a very long time. Just our schedules kind of didn't work out, and finally we finally got him on this week, and it's really great to have him on because when I first got back into collecting, which was right around the pandemic, Bronze Age Nerd was one of the first channels I really connected with and continue to just engage with and watch over that span of time. And it's a real just treat to have him on the channel and kind of get to know him better as a collector and what he's all about. So yeah, Chris, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your channel on YouTube.
Sure. Hey, I'm Christopher, aka the Bronze Age Nerd. And yeah, so a few years ago, I decided to start a YouTube channel, and I'd been toying around with different concepts of what I'd want to do. And comic books have always been a part of my life, as I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more as we get into the show. But that's something that was, kind of always rolling around back there. But I've had a couple times, I think most collectors have, where I stepped out of comic books for a while. I kind of, the pull box was getting a little too big, or you just weren't, interested in the runs you were reading or whatever it might be. So, maybe that was kind of like around the perfect timing because I was kind of just starting to come back to comics after taking a little break around the time my daughter was born. I was like, hey, I'm too busy for this stuff. And so basically it kind of lined up with kind of this boom starting to happen with comics. And that was kind of right before everything really took off. And also just my interest in trying to learn like video editing and how this whole thing works, right? Like I wanted to learn how to make thumbnails, and I wanted to learn how to do editing and lighting and sound. And I still have a long way to go on some of those things, but I think I've come a long way on other things. Yeah. And it was really kind of just a desire to see if I could do it. The other thing that happened is during the pandemic, the very beginning of it, it was a, very non-social environment, right? Like it wasn't a lot going on. I was kind of in a little isolated community too. I live in a very tiny town in Washington. And so I thought, well, I can connect with people online. Like I used to do that when I was a kid. I can do that again, right? I always did it to a certain extent, but I kind of quit social media for a while before I started doing this. And I just said, hey, you know what? I started discovering some of these channels that do comic book content. I'm like, there's actually like, I knew about like Comics Explained and comic tropes, but when I started finding channels that did, collections or unboxings, or they were doing CGC submissions or spec content, I thought, man, I could do something along those lines. Like I have a lot of strong opinions. So I just decided to give it a try, and I set out with kind of two goals. One goal is that every video I made, I wanted to try to make something better. I wanted to, maybe it was tweaking the editing or tweaking the lighting or being better prepared or having a more original idea or how I shared out the information online, like about my videos or whatever it was. And the other rule was that I always tried to make something that my viewers, the people that were already watching, wanted to see, hopefully. And that's kind of where we started, and now we're here.
You have a huge advantage. You have an awesome voice. I wish I had that voice.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's definitely probably the number one compliment I receive, and I appreciate that. It's just kind of gifted in that way, I guess, naturally gifted. But yeah, definitely something I've been trying to kind of think about possibly doing, like, narration, that kind of stuff too, because so many people have said that. It's really kind of encouraged me to kind of keep going with that kind of stuff. So.
Oh yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
I'll keep that in mind, narration.
All right. So, one thing about your channel that I really appreciate, not too many people actually delve into the speculation and the FOMO part of the hobby, which is personally, I find that a little bit annoying about, not to say it's part of the hobby. We can't deny that it's part of the hobby, but it's one of those things that I personally don't take interest in, and I'm sure you feel kind of the same way. I think you and Josh's comics are like the two guys who are like really adamant about, hey, say no to FOMO. Let's not hop on something just because it's trending up or getting hot based off like movie industry news or whatever. Can you kind of expand on your sort of philosophy on that whole concept? What about FOMO is really just bugs you?
Yeah, totally. Well, you know, kind of that idea that I talked about where I wanted to always bring something to the table that I thought my viewers would appreciate. Part of that is my natural personality is very much a contrarian and a devil's advocate type of personality. And so if everybody is saying left, I'm like, well, what's up with right? You know, if everybody's saying right, I'm like, well, what's going on with left? As I point to the wrong direction for myself either way. But yeah, it's just one of those things where I kind of was thinking about what is, because I would see it in forums, I would see it in Instagram comments, I would see it in comments on my own videos when I talked about, like, you know, I used to do a lot of like hauls, like I'd go pick up a bunch of comics and I'd show them off, and I used to do a lot of that kind of content. And for various reasons, I really slowed down on how many comics I was buying, and so I didn't really have that content to make anymore. And all the comments were like, you know, if I got like that new hot book and I picked up a copy, it would be like, oh, that was on this list, or can you believe what Key Collector did, or how they're talking about this book? And I was taking all that in and just going, there's a lot of people that have similar feelings to me about what is popping off and like why it's hot. And I think as humans, we're obviously fascinated with like top 10 lists. It's obviously like if you spend any time on YouTube at all, if you're ever clicked a clickbait link, you know, top 10 reasons to do this, you know, top 10 comic books to invest in, right? And I'm fascinated with the creation of stuff like that. Like what thought process or logic did people use to create that? And so I was like, okay, well, if I take all those ideas, it just kind of came to me one day. It's like, well, if I take all those ideas, what if I just actually looked at the main big lists out there? And when I first started doing it, I was also looking at some YouTubers that were making their own list every week. It's kind of funny, if you've noticed, a lot of those guys don't do that anymore. I mean, some of the big ones still do, of course, but there's way less other lists out there. It's mostly just, you know, like the ones I talk about now. I just focus on Key Collector Trending 20, CBSI Hot 10, and the Cover Price Top 10. And the reason I do that for the most part, I feel like those are the biggest three. I really hate to use the word official, but they're like the ones that most people kind of look to or turn to and kind of, you know, see what's going on. And so I was like, all right, well, let's just take those lists and let's think about, you know, what if I was the biggest pessimist in the world? Not a big reach for me, because I am a pretty big cynic, pessimist kind of guy. I hope for the best and I plan for the worst. And let's take the 5 worst ones out of those, at least the ones that I identify as being like, why is that on there? Like, why? And I'll admit, some weeks it's harder than others. Some weeks it's like, man, there's a lot of like silver and Bronze Age keys on here. It's like, sure, they might not be worth $500 more tomorrow, but they're not going to like drop like a rock. And then some weeks it's like it's just all ratios, or it's all like hot covers. And it's like, well, not every single one of these is going to be a good investment. So it's just kind of navigating that and picking that. And like you said about the FOMO part of it, just kind of address that. That is just me being fed up on the behalf of a lot of people that are very fed up with this kind of system we're in now with comic collecting. And also like willing to admit that there's things that are good about that too. Like, one quick example, everyone is upset about exclusive covers. Not everyone. A lot of people are upset about exclusive covers and all the ratios. And, you know, some books have 45, 50, 60, 70 covers. Okay, that's insane. But there are good things that go along with that too. Like, there's a lot of artists that get work. There's artists that get discovered. There's shops that, you know, if they have a hot one of those, it can kind of help them stay afloat. And I don't want to dismiss any of that at the same time. So again, it's that balanced approach, not just taking everything and being like, you know, Mighty Mel V says I'm the best hater in the game. Like that's how he refers to me whenever I go on his show, right? I take that as a point of pride because it means people are paying attention. But I also hope to inject some logic into what I'm saying. I'm not just hating on the list because they're out there. And you can almost take it like, hey, I'm only picking 5 books. I'm not picking 10 every week like they are. I'm not just saying this is the worst about comics to buy. I'm some of those are good picks, and I offer respect to that too. But that's kind of the logic that's helped create that.
Yeah.
Yeah, those variants could be a nightmare for completionists.
100%. And you know, there's so much with comic book collectors. So many of us have, you know, it's this thing you hear over and over, and it's become a cliche. Like, I have OCD. Most comic book collectors you talk to will say they have some form of that, right? And like, I don't mean to take away from people that actually do have real obsessive compulsive disorder, that kind of stuff, but most of us can relate to that. Like, you know, if I'm like the guy who, like, when I was buying trade paperbacks, if they switched like how the spine looks, I'd be super pissed off.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like, it doesn't fit. It's yellow. The rest of them are red. What are you doing? You know, like, so I have that kind of, you know, mentality.
Even when I'm buying books, I don't want to buy books at different size and
yeah, exactly. So it's just one of those things where, you know, I just kind of was aware of that kind of, like, you know, ability that most of us collectors have to kind of be problematic about that stuff.
Cool. Yeah. So I am going to play devil's advocate here.
Cool.
and say what's a pick recently that you said, hey, don't, you know, just ignore this book. It's just FOMO. The book's going to go down again. But you turned out to be wrong. And you'll admit, oh, this is a book that has had more longevity or more lasting, you know, presence in the hobby since, you know, debuted or whatever.
Sure. Well, there's a couple really hard ones, because even when I put them on the list, I had to kind of put them on with an asterisk and say, hey, look, I know this is the first appearance of Batgirl, right? Like, no one's, it's not like we're going to wake up in a world in a month where everyone's like, Batgirl, I don't care about. I mean, there's fans of Batgirl. I'm one of them. If I came across like a low grade copy of Batgirl that was a good deal, I would scoop it up in a heartbeat. So don't get me wrong. First appearance. But there's been some examples. The biggest example for me is, it's kind of a weird one. It's Deadpool Black, White, and Blood number 4, the Panosian 1 in 25 variant. I think I got all that right. It's the first appearance of oh gosh, it's a spider character that first appeared in a Japanese manga, but it's their first US appearance in a comic.
Wow. And
that's kind of, you think about it, number 4 in a limited run book, like, a lot of people fell off, and you're talking about a ratio. My argument is that most people were going for the cover. I didn't really realize how much, because I have this weird thing to talk about OCD, where to me that's not the first appearance of that character, because they've already appeared somewhere else, and I can't remember the other book off the top of my head where they appear in. So for me, it was like, well, it's just because it's a hot cover, because it is kind of a cool. I think it's like Deadpool, like, fighting like in a sushi restaurant kind of thing. It's all black and white behind him. It's kind of a cool cover. And so I guess I just kind of went over it more for that reason, rather than for this character who wasn't really their first appearance. But I forgot, you know, first appearance in US comics is a big deal for a lot of people. And I probably miscalculated on that one. That said, you could have bought it since that list came out at several dips. So, I mean, ultimately waiting probably would have paid off if you were patient.
Yeah.
My big fear is that people watch my list, and if they ever hear me say that, they think like, oh no, like, I need to wait a month. No. Usually wait a little bit longer. Usually wait like 6 weeks to 2 months. It depends on the book. My advice is to go set up like those eBay save searches and just follow it, right? Just wait for one to hit that no one's bidding on or no one's biting on, or maybe it has a bad description.
Yeah.
And then bite on that. But yeah, it's happened a few times.
Yeah. eBay is actually not a great place to, like, if you see it on a list and then you go to eBay, by that time it's already late, because everybody's watching the list and going to eBay. Everybody's doing that. So I guess it depends on how fast you do that turnaround. But yeah.
Real fast, I want to shout out Preston and Ozzy for saying Secure Spider. That was the name I couldn't pull. Thank you very much.
Secure Spider. All right. So we're going to get into now your sort of your origin story. You know, how old were you when you got into comics? How did you get into comics? What were you into when you started? And just talk us through the evolution of your history as a collector.
Right. Well, when I was about 6 years old, I got hit by a radioactive beard comet flying from space, and it just kind of set me on this path that I never quite know. That's where it all began. In a world where beards hit the earth, right? Like, so, no,
I know it was from different planet for sure.
The origin story. Yeah. So, and I'll show one of these books here in a second that kind of makes up this origin story, because we talked about that ahead of the show. What really happened is I loved G.I. Joe when I was a kid. I was a big G.I. Joe fan. And my dad, when I was in, it was my mom too. She definitely supported it. I was a kid, I grew up in the 80s. G.I. Joe, Real American Hero was a big deal. So I got a bunch of the early, like, I think wave 2 of the figures. Most of those are gone and lost to time. I do have a few still left though.
Wow.
And love those toys. And eventually love the cartoon too.
Best toys ever, yeah.
Oh man. I mean, if you liked anything to do with the military at all, or even like cool looking character designs, and you grew up at that time frame, yeah, they were awesome. My daughter is 4 now. She watches the cartoon and she likes like Lady J and stuff, right? Like it's Scarlet. Like she identifies with those characters. So it was just a matter of loving those. And then my first exposure to comics at all was my grandparents had like some old Beetle Bailey and the Sad Sack books at their house. They never really interested me in a big way. I was more drawn to like Calvin and Hobbes, or for like comic strips or whatever. And so I guess I got used to the format through that. And then from there, my dad started bringing home, like he'd travel around the Northwest for work. He worked for a big land management company. He was a forester. And so he'd drive around. He'd end up in these small towns or whatever. I think he'd go to like little comic shops or little newsstands or whatever and pick up like a G.I. Joe comic here or there. And he'd bring them home to me. And I just started reading them. And to me, comics were just G.I. Joe comics. Like that's all I cared about, right? And then an amazing thing happened with one of the best animated intro songs of all time. And that's X-Men, the animated series. Like a lot of people my age or close to my age, I just instantly was like, whoa, I'm hooked on these guys. Even before the cartoon premiered, the whole Pizza Hut campaign where they were doing like the little boxes with the drink cups and the comic, that kind of appealed to me as well. And I was like, I'm kind of interested in this. Like, I already like these G.I. Joe comic books. Let's check this out. And from there, I was off to the races. So that's kind of what got me into it. My dad getting me into it. I was a collector at a very young age, and being like that OCD, persnickety type of kid that I was bagging and boarding from a pretty early age. Like a lot of those childhood comics I had early on are pretty well preserved. Unfortunately, not all of them. Like I remember having like a Thundercats 1 and like a couple other books that are kind of sought after a little bit now, that were just ripped up and terrible. But most of the early comic books I had were in pretty good shape once I learned that you could protect them. Yeah. So that's mostly it. And then I spent a lot of time, reading X-Men. I was very much into the whole Image wave of stuff in the 90s as well. All the early Image titles, although the stories were so average in most of those books that I fell off of them pretty quick. I stuck with Spawn the longest. And then I really liked Gen 13 stuff too.
It's fun.
It's fun. It hasn't aged very well, but when you were reading it at the time, it was pretty good. And then I read a lot of the Babe books back then too, like the not so much Witchblade. I know a lot of people were into Witchblade. I kind of was, but Glory was a big one for me. Vampirella, stuff like that, right? So Lady Death, Evil Ernie, all that. So I got into all that too. And then, I moved out, started my career, and most of my comics just kind of sat for a long, long time. And eventually I just got tired of moving them around. Because I'd move, for my job, I'd move for like, every couple years. And it's like, depending on where I live, maybe I didn't have a lot of friends that wanted to help me lug around a bunch of comic boxes. Because I had a lot of long boxes. I don't even know, maybe like 30 or something, which people have tons, but that was a lot. And around the time my daughter was born, I actually sold off almost all that collection. I kept 4 short boxes of comics. So most of the comics in my collection are stuff that I've built up since then now. Luckily, I mean, I kept most of the stuff that was valuable, but also I just kept the runs I cared about, like stuff that no one likes, like the Maverick run from the late 90s, Alpha Flight, I think it's volume 3, the John Ostrander run, like just weird stuff that I really like that is not valuable. Although I guess there's a Big Hero 6 key in that run now, but yeah, it's just stuff that like I like Union #1. I like the Union. I kept all my Gen 13.
I love Union, yeah.
Yeah, like there was just something cool about that character design. Like again, it's like most of the image stuff. It was more style over substance.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of how I started out, and so I always had like this affinity for oddball characters. Like I liked Maverick, I liked Union. Cardiac was a character I really liked from Spider-Man. Just weird characters that people didn't love.
So if you had to choose between art and story, what would you choose?
Well, that's the funny thing, right? Like art will draw me in every time, but it doesn't hold me. So I need the story. Unfortunately, comic books, they're at their best when there's a parity between art and story. However, that's a rare combination, right? Like I feel like there's usually one that's better than the other. And I tend to like when the story's better than the art. But as long as they're both kind of like in that acceptable range, I'm okay. But if you want me to keep reading for 70 plus issues, like or I read the whole run of Walking Dead. I picked up Walking Dead from issue 7 on. I had the entire run.
Wow.
That's
a long run too.
It's a long run. Yeah, I had the entire run. I think I started getting trade paperbacks like around issue like after the All Out War, like after issue 110 or something like that. I started getting the trade paperbacks, and that's how I collected it. But I read the whole damn thing like week to week or month to month and everything. And in order to keep me doing that, like I didn't love the art in Walking Dead. It's obviously a very basic, fast artwork. It has its own charm, of course. Don't get me wrong. But like that story kept me going, right? There's very few titles I read just because the artwork was really good for a very long time.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, you're collecting sort of like history there is so very similar to mine. I mean, we both share a love for G.I. Joe and X-Men. And the fact that, like we're collecting in the 90s and then went away when we went to, started our life in adulthood, we kind of went away from it. And then we've come back to it. So it's very similar in those instances. And I think that's part of the reason why I think I connect with you so well. All right. So yeah, we're going to get into now some of your books. You're going to show off, I think you prepared 5 books, correct?
Yeah. So I chose my 5. I wouldn't even necessarily 5 favorite. And I was mentioning before the show, what this inspired me to do at some point on my channel, you'll see this, is I'm now going to do like a collection highlight video series because it was so hard to pick 5 favorites. So I kind of went for like, oh, hey, Danny. I kind of went for maybe like top 5 most valuable or coolest first appearances maybe in my collection. I'm most people, it's like, if you ask me what my favorite movie is or whatever, it would change day to day, week to week. So it's hard for me to do that. I grabbed 5 books I feel pretty comfortable saying like these are 5 of the ones that are in the box that I'd grab if there was, a flood or something like that and I needed to get out, right?
Yeah.
So do you want to see the first book?
Yeah, let's take a look.
So this is the one book, I've said this on my channel before. This is the one book that if I ever sold it all, like I had to get rid of it all, like liquidated, I would fight tooth and nail, unless it was the difference between my family eating or not, I would never get rid of this book. And that is my childhood copy of G.I. Joe #1. I got this when I was like 8 or 9. And yeah, like I was saying, I kept good care of my stuff. It got a 9.6.
Wow.
Funny thing is, I actually got a really cool deal on a newsstand. And I bought it for like, I think $80. And I was like, that was like when G.I. Joe was still climbing before the Snake Eyes movie came out. And I got it graded and it got a 9.6. And I had this moment where I was like, man, like, should I keep the newsstand over? Because it's worth a lot more in a newsstand. Should I keep that over the direct? Nah, I kept this one just because it's my dad gave it to me. It was a birthday present, if I'm not mistaken. I was so young, I actually don't remember, but I think it was a birthday present. And I think I was reading around like issue like 40 or 50 when I got this, I think. So it was me going back and like finally reading how it started, right? Because the Marvel series is a much different story than the cartoon. It's a much different story than any other stuff you might have seen, as you guys probably know. And it's just a great Larry Hama, amazing creator, amazing writer. It's a great story, and
yeah, it's a wonderful story.
Him putting his actual real world experiences into it shows. There's a connection and like a seriousness you don't expect in a toy line comic.
Yep.
And I have a lot of good memories of it. So yeah, that's the number one, I guess, like the crown jewel in my collection, like in a personal way, right?
Yeah.
So
awesome.
That reminds me, my first book that you, I remember the first book I ever got online through some kind of award was your book, the G.I. Joe book you sent me.
Yeah, G.I. Joe 21.
Yeah, G.I. Joe 21. Oh,
yeah.
Is that? I imagine you already had a copy of it. Was that your original collection that you upgraded, or?
So, I didn't actually. G.I. Joe 21 is one of those issues I never had. I had about, I think about 90% of the original run, and then I sold most of my books. So I really only kept maybe like 4 or 5 of them.
Yeah.
21 is one I just didn't have ever until I was an adult and I got back into comic book collecting, and it was, I think, like the second or third book that I ever like went out and sought out the actual issue. The first one, when I sold my collection, I sold Star Wars Heir to the Empire #1, which is the first appearance of Thrawn. I didn't know it was the first appearance of Thrawn. Like, it made sense looking back on it that it would have been, but it never like occurred to me that was the first appearance of Thrawn.
Yeah.
And I love that series, but I've already kept so much Star Wars, I can't keep more. And so I let a few things go, like my entire run of Heir to the Empire. So one of the first books I sought out was that one, and the second one was G.I. Joe 21. And what happened is I ordered 2 copies because I wanted to send them off and get graded. And the funny thing about that is a lot of people don't realize a lot of what people think are first prints are actually second prints, because there's a lot of second prints of that book floating around. That's actually third print. The second print is a ghost. The third print is the black Spidey head in the UPC box. That's the third print. The second print is the same, and it says second printing on the indicia. But anyways, so I picked up 2 newsstands because I wanted to make sure that I had first prints, and the newsstands were all first prints. And I swear both sellers sent them in the manila envelope. No, no cardboard, nothing.
No.
So, and they were both high grade, and luckily from both sellers, I got like a partial refund or whatever, to the point where I was happy. One ended up getting a 6.5. One ended up getting a 7.5.
Not bad.
But then what happened is kind of through some of the stuff I do, and we'll kind of show off some of this later. There's a few viewers that have been very, very, very generous and kind with me. One of them has been unbelievably kind, to the point where it's literally made me cry before. It's just insane how much this person has affected my life by being generous to me. And one of the things that he did is he sent me a copy of G.I. Joe 21 that was rather low grade, to use as a giveaway. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to pay that book forward. And I already have a couple copies I was lucky enough to secure, and I want to pay that forward. And so, yeah, when I did that contest, it was all about, I called it the Comic Karma, for a very specific reason.
Yeah, Comic Karma. Yeah, remember, hashtag Comic Karma.
Yeah. And in fact, that takes us right next to the next book. And I'll just kind of show that, because that same guy, his name is Starset Comics. He's an amazing individual. He sent me this, which is the first appearance of Wolverine.
Wow.
And he sent it to me slab. He didn't send it to me raw.
180, right?
Yeah, 180. Yeah, sorry, I was trying to get the glare.
I mean, that's the first appearance of Wolverine.
Oh yeah,
it's
100%.
You can't argue it. It's the first appearance,
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to tell you like that. Like obviously I have a 181 poster right back there. I'm not going to tell you that like 181 isn't the better book to own or whatever as far as value. Sure.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it's the first appearance. It's just the first full appearance, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah. But that book skyrocketed in value just over the last couple of years. So,
I mean, yeah, I think people got priced out of 181 for sure, which is part of the factor. And I think a lot of people too, I think the logic appeals to them too, that like it is the first appearance. Like it's not like, you know, if once you see the panel, I did a video on this a while ago because I compared Wolverine's first appearance to Gambit's first appearance to Bishop's first appearance, like 3 X-Men characters. And it's just funny how people value different books differently for each of those characters. But once you see the full panel, like, you know, Wolverine coming through, you know, he's in that panel, like, how do you not say that that's not the first appearance of Wolverine?
It's a full page. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. So I was very just very humbled and felt like this community has done so much for me that I had to do something back. So I started that campaign where I was giving away books, and that's kind of been a history. Something I've done on my channel is tried to do giveaways. Like I have my very own personal collection that I love and I value. I don't have a lot of other stuff that's like truly valuable outside of the stuff that I'm showing here, really. So it's kind of hard to like make it like super worthwhile. So I hope to give out something that's like it's going to make an emotional connection to somebody. Like, you know, I didn't know who was going to win that G.I. Joe 21, but hopefully with somebody was like that like G.I. Joe or like Larry Hama or that like Storm Shadow or thought it was cool that it was a silent issue or, you know, that's what I was hoping for.
First big book I ever got, and then that was my first giveaway. That was because when I was giving away books, I feel like I'm not giving away anything big, but I feel like I was giving away something big with that book, and I know exactly who it went to a chop and drop. So
okay,
so that's what
cool.
that book is.
Yeah, it's first of all, the Silent Issue is my favorite book of all time. Like it's just hands down, just the best comic book of all time, and
it's so cool.
Yeah, it's cool, and so that's a great one.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's just being like so. I'm the contrarian, right? Usually my favorite character in like a team or whatever is not the most popular character. A lot of people know famously my favorite X-Men is Cyclops. It's not Wolverine, you know, it's not Gambit.
My favorite Cyclops too.
Hey, there we go. That's awesome.
I think Cyclops is the Captain America of the X-Men.
100%, right? Like to me, he's the leader. He's got like kind of a troubled past. He overcomes it. He has a lot of issues. He's afraid he's going to hurt everybody around him that he loves. You know, there's a lot of stuff there that's kind of cool. But people kind of gloss over it, and the Fox movies kind of ruined him, unfortunately, which doesn't help.
Made him a whiny.
Yeah, and you know, thankfully, like Joss Whedon's run kind of helped revive some of the badassness that is Cyclops and stuff like that too. But so my point was that I usually go for kind of a character that most people don't go for. When it comes to G.I. Joe, though, my favorite character is Snake Eyes. So, you know, besides G.I. Joe 1, which I already had, G.I. Joe 21 is probably the most iconic Snake Eyes story there is, right? In comics. So, and plus it's the first appearance of Storm Shadow. So you kind of get the yin and the yang there, and it's just awesome. So
yeah,
great book.
But before we go on, what's his name? CJ asked if you want to be a G.I. Joe when you grew up. He said he wanted to be Hulk when he grew up.
Yes, he asked if you wanted to be G.I. Joe. Did you want to be G.I. Joe growing up?
Kind of. Like I definitely ran around my yard playing it enough. There was in part of the work that I do, a lot of it goes towards veterans benefits, and a big part of the reason why is when I was growing up, I always thought I was going to join the military. I thought I was going to join specifically the Air Force, and I turned 18 in 2000. You know, right before 9/11, basically, and I was 19 right at 9/11 and getting ready to go into college and everything. And I had big second thoughts. It's not that we were going to war around the world. I was okay with that. It was, are we doing it for the right reasons? Like, are we going to go to the right places? And it seemed to be a very the future was very uncertain, is all I'll say when it comes to that. So I had major second doubts about that. I also had an ear surgery when I was a kid to repair like a hole that was in my eardrum, and I'm not sure I could have become a pilot, which was my whole goal. So the reason that I wanted, to help veterans as an adult is because I faced that decision when I was younger, and you could say I chickened out or I just didn't want to do it or whatever. And so I have a tremendous amount of respect for people that go in, specifically, especially people that go in with the intent to serve their country. I know a lot of people go in because it's their only choice or because a lot of other reasons too, like their parents make them, all these different things. But still, anybody who served, I have a tremendous amount of respect for, and that's part of the reason why it all kind of ties into that, is because it's something I wanted to do when I was a kid. Had a lot of other goals too, of course, but that was kind of always like in the back of my head. I'm like, I can do that and help serve my country, and I didn't do it, so I have a lot of respect for the people that did.
Great.
All right,
so they came full.
I hope so. So we'll move on to the third book here. This is one that I picked up about a year and a half ago, I think now.
Yeah.
And at one point, my whole goal was to get every mutant or major X character, get their first appearance and get it graded.
Wow. That's
and
cool.
It's a huge goal. And it depends on where you draw the line, right? Because there's so many like minor characters that were introduced, like after, like, say, the Wolverine and the X-Men run or the new X-Men run, and I have a lot, but especially all the major characters, like working your way down. Like my holy grail of comic books is X-Men 1. By far, it's actually, you could call it a trinity, because it's X-Men 1, it's Wolverine 181 to get the first full appearance, and it's Giant Size X-Men number 1. So since I don't have those books, you find me going after a lot of other stuff. And yeah, not a mutant, of course, but first Deadpool, such an important character, and honorary X-Men, honorary X-Force, just adjacent to the X-Men in so many ways. Had to grab that one, and I got a great deal from an awesome shop that I've worked with in the past. Turlock Comics picked it up. Raw posted it, and I just hit him up and said, hey, I'd be interested if you guys can send me some extra pictures. I'd be interested, and I'd want to see you guys clean and press this thing, see how high you can get it. And it probably was like a 9.92 as it was, and then they did their magic on it and got it to a 9.6. Nice. So, and they thought pretty seriously that it was going to come back at 9.8, and I was like, I don't know, guys, like I don't see it, but I also thought it was gonna be a 9.4. So got super lucky on that one.
Congrats. Oh, that's a great pickup.
Yeah. So
hey Eric, wow.
And then so that was that Hulk 180. That was Christmas before last. I got that from Starset.
So let's focus on Deadpool as the character. Yeah, are you excited about the movie?
I'm really hesitant about the movie because I loved the first movie. I thought the second movie was just okay. It didn't have the same charm to me that the first one did. It just felt like, okay, this is the joke again with a more complex plot. I loved like the X-Force sequence. I thought that was funny, like especially like as doing what I hilarious. Do, and everybody, all the speculators, like I'm just thinking them watching that scene, and I'm like laughing my ass off at those guys that banked heavy on like Shatterstar or some of the other characters that came along. I thought it was cool, Domino being like the only one that walked away from it because of her powers was just great. I thought that was an amazing portrayal. I definitely don't want to like say like I hated the movie or anything like that. It's just, I guess my expectations, occasionally I let them get really high for things, and my expectations for Deadpool 2 were pretty high. Like being such a big Cyclops fan, seeing Cable in a movie, like me, 12-year-old me was just like, oh my God, this is going to be awesome. And, great casting too and everything. And it just felt like I wanted more of that classic Cable and Deadpool kind of buddy cop kind of dynamic, and we never really quite got that. We had more of like the snarky adversarial I'm gonna blow you away and let you regenerate, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Which is good, but I just wanted a little bit more for it. So Deadpool 3, I have really mixed feelings on Hugh Jackman coming back. Like, I know everybody in the world seems to be excited about it, and I want everybody to enjoy that movie, and I want it to be great. Like, everything will be awesome if it's great. I just have doubts about how good it's going to be. I feel like Ryan Reynolds got too much control on the last couple of movies he did with the director, and I don't know if maybe Ryan Reynolds needs a little bit of reining in to play the best Deadpool. I hope I'm wrong.
So
So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
I don't understand what Preston is asking. Is that it soft serves first appearance?
Soft serves first appearance.
I don't understand.
Oh, because of what happens to him in the movie, probably.
Okay.
It turns into soft serve.
That whole scene was hilarious, though, with all the X-Force characters getting killed off.
Oh, it's great. And I mean, again, I can't stress enough, like, just how much that first movie, it nailed it, because it wasn't afraid to be R-rated, to be
Hopefully.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, if we're playing Limbo with the lowest possible setting for how low that bar is, yeah, sure. Love and Thunder was terrible.
Well, what? No one's here seen Quantumania.
Yeah,
What are the reviews about that?
I want to completely move on from the previous X-Men.
Yeah, like that's the thing, is I've talked about that a few times. Like I get, Logan to me was almost the perfect swan song. I actually disagree with the ending to Logan. I know a lot of people love it, but I think it would have been better to see him go on and found the school, to the Jean Grey School for Gifted Youngsters, right? That to me would have been a more fitting full circle for that version of Wolverine. But besides that, it was a great movie.
I love the movie. The movie was awesome.
Yeah,
it was more of a Western story for me.
Yeah, and to see him kind of fade away as that kind of like tragic hero was perfect. And I don't know, like, seeing him come back, I'm just kind of like, I'm ready to move on. I also get, like, the one thing that maybe people could say we got robbed of was like Hugh Jackman having a proper Deadpool interaction. So I get that. I'd also argue that he deserved a better Sabretooth interaction too, though.
Oh yeah,
true. Yeah.
But I mean, because there is the fight in the first movie, but by today's standards, especially, it's pretty bad. I don't know. Yeah, Caliban was good in Logan too. Good point, comic journey. But I really want to see where they go forward, and I don't want Patrick Stewart as Xavier again as the leader of the X-Men. He's great. But also, Charles Xavier wasn't that old when he founded the X-Men.
Yeah.
He was bald, but he wasn't that old.
Patrick Stewart's pretty up there now.
Yeah, like watching him in Picard, it's interesting, but he's definitely, you can tell he's an older gentleman, and I think that he brought a good gravity to Doctor Strange, to that version of the character. That was cool in my head, and I think in the director's head, I think that was kind of the animated TV series version of Professor Xavier almost. That was great. Let it be done.
Yeah.
So
we're good. Agree.
No, definitely not. No. Yeah, every time I've done review content, I think I'm just such a contrarian. I don't think it's ever really done well. I don't blame people. Although I did start doing something for my channel members, where every month I watch a terrible comic book movie. And we started with Batman and Robin was the first one. I never had seen it before. And so if you want to watch my hateful thoughts on movies in real time, you can.
Is that the one with the bat nipple?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and the ice skating Mr. Freeze henchman, and every bad pun you can imagine.
All right, let's see the next book.
All right, so the next book. So yeah, like I was saying, I got.
Hey, good seeing you, Eric. Eric is from Byron Community. He's here from Byron Community. But welcome to Comic Community, Eric.
So I got that Hulk 180 from Starset, and the next year he followed it up with this.
Ooh, big one.
and it's a newsstand too.
Oh my goodness.
This is a book that I'll be honest, like I did not think I was ever going to own. At a certain point, I wanted to. Also, kind of a fun thing because is this the first appearance of Venom? I don't really think it is, but a lot of people obviously this is the book, and it's the book to own for sure.
You think the cover dictates what the first appearance is?
What's that?
You think cover design dictates what the first appearance is?
Well,
everybody agrees on, being a first appearance.
It could, but I mean that's obviously Spidey in the costume, right? So, which I mean that's going back to the black suit. But I think 298, 299, and I owned both those books, and I was like, and I own 301, so I have in that kind of that story, that those first 4 issues. Yeah, in his hand, well, a female version of Eddie Brock's hand before they knew it was going to be a man, appeared in the subway pushing Peter. But yeah, you don't really get to choose what the key is that everybody finds is valuable, and obviously just for like the notoriety of the cover alone.
Yeah.
I mean, even though in itself it's an homage cover, it's the cover that gets homaged to death. But yeah, to get that, I got blown away. Like that was, and I made sure to confirm with him, like, that's it, right? You're not going to send me anything else, because man, you're sending me too good of books. Like, you're being way too kind.
Yeah, that getting gifted that is incredible. Wow.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. And he's a wonderful person. And I never talk about him without passing the opportunity to say, go follow him on IG. Starset, I think it's Starset Collectibles is what he goes by now. On IG used to be Starset Comics. Follow his whatnot and all that stuff. He's a very ethical, good seller in the community, and he also is just a collector. He loves Spidey. Spidey's his guy, so great guy. Nice. Go give him a follow.
All right.
He inspired Comic Karma, the little campaign run. So that's great. Yes, Starset is amazing. And speaking of the veterans and stuff, he is actually an active duty Air Force. So I talked about how when I was a kid, I wanted to join the Air Force, and for various reasons didn't or couldn't. He went out and did that, and he's a pilot. He's a cool dude. So lots of good reasons to support him. And go follow X11 Bravo. Those guys do some good work too.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think you have one more book left.
I got one more book left, and this one means a lot to me, although might not to a lot of people. I think a lot of people think it's cool, but I think they'd be like, that issue? Really? So what happened is, I tell the story before, when I was kind of getting back into comic books. X-Men 1 was my grail. I always looked at him, and I had a chance to buy X-Men 1 signed by Stan Lee in a CGC 1.5 for $2,500. At the time, that's too much money. That's a lot of money. But I was looking at it and I was like, man, that'd be cool. And now that book, I mean, I don't even know what that worth is. I don't want to know what that's worth right now. But I was lucky, and 3 years in a row, I won my fantasy football league with my friends, like a paid, fantasy football league, right? And so I was like, okay, that book got away, and I'll never be able to afford that again, probably. What else can I get? I want a Stan Lee book that's signed by Stan Lee, and I want it to be a story he wrote. That was the most important thing to me. I didn't, Stan Lee signed everything, right? Didn't matter. He didn't have to work on it. It didn't even have to have his name on it. He'd still sign it. But I needed something he wrote, and I wanted it to be an X-Men book. So I got pretty lucky on this, like, I feel like, and I got X-Men 16.
Wow.
Signed by Stan Lee.
Nice. Oh, it's a beautiful signature.
Wow.
It's not a key, really. I mean, it's the third appearance of the Sentinels. It's like the second appearance of Master Mold. It's maybe not the most beautiful cover. It's not high grade. I don't care.
That's a beautiful cover. No, that is a beautiful cover.
Yeah, like, it depends on your definition, for sure. Like, I think it's cool, but a lot of people, like, yellow covers are kind of derisive with people, but I like it a lot. I mean, I like it enough that it's one of my 5 favorite comic books I own.
Yeah.
And for multiple reasons, but yeah.
Does it have when exactly he signed it? The date he signed it?
this was signed by him on September 4th, 2010. And that was another thing. My birthday is September 6th, and it's, September 4th. It's not the same day or anything like that. That would have been amazing. But it was so close. It was like that definitely kind of ticked me over there. So it's just cool. And
that's awesome.
It's the earliest X-Men issue I own, actually, in the run. And I'm working on the run, and I don't know anything under 16. So you can imagine how desperate it is for me to get any of these books. So to have that one's good. So
I don't get that.
Awesome. That is a great book.
I love you.
Especially with the
what this mean, Chris? What does? I was wondering if I should hate you for your X-Men cover. Now I know.
Chris, did you check and see if that's actually a one of one, like the only Stan signed X-Men 16?
I don't think it is, but I haven't looked at like the census either.
I mean, I know Stan signed a lot of books and probably signed a lot of early X-Men books, but
I know one guy who has every issue from 1 to 300. I think it's 300 signed, and I think the first like 50 or so are signed by Stan Lee. So I know there's definitely at least one other one signed by Stan Lee, and I think signed by, I can't remember who else he had signed it, but I'm pretty sure he had a few. I don't know if it was Kirby, but he had somebody else sign his too. So yeah.
Well, still, those are rare. That's definitely a rare copy there.
Anyway, I dropped the link for X11 if you guys.
Yeah, go give him a follow, guys. He does some great work with the community, especially when it pertains to veterans. So
drop my link. Shoot. Okay. All right, I agree with them. I will drop your link.
Yeah, and Nagu, no, I didn't try any other branches of the military. Like I said, it was the timing of us going into the aftermath of the September 11th attacks and what was going on there. And again, like, I have all the respect in the world, more respect than I do for pretty much any other people, for people that chose that and kept going with that decision. I saw us going down a path, and I from my perspective, it turned out to be right. I saw us going down a path where I was like, what are we even going to be doing in a few years with this stuff? And, it definitely went on brutally for a long time. And props to all the people that served during that time. I can only thank them. So.
Yeah. X11 is the man.
Yeah.
Well, that's for Agu. The other one is for X11.
So kind of looking forward, what are your plans this year, either for the channel or for the collection? Both?
Yeah. And I had such a rough December that like almost all of my, and kind of beginning of January too, almost all of my plans got derailed or at least postponed. One of my best videos I ever did was my collection goals for 2022. And I have screwed up two things. I never made a follow-up video to show where I landed on the 10 books I was looking for. Spoiler alert, I did not complete the list. And the other part of it is making a list for 2023, which I have a list for 2023, but I need to make a video about that. And it's funny. I think it was Reggie. I think Reggie made a video being like, don't make lists. And he's, he approached it like in a very even manner. I'm not talking out of class here, but I don't agree with that. I think it's good to make lists, but you have to know going into it that it's okay to fail at those lists, and it's okay to learn.
Wait, Reggie Collect said don't make lists.
Yeah, man, maybe I'm mistaken.
Isn't he the guy that keeps doing lists?
I think yeah. Well, and he even says in the video, like, I've done it in the past, and here's why I think you shouldn't, basically. And he has some good reasons. It's worth watching the video. But I kind of disagree with the concept of, I think that as long as you have the right goals getting into it, it's a good motivation. I'm a goal person. I make lots of lists. One of the goals of the channel was to make every video better. I'm about incremental changes for the better, right? Because I think it's just a good benchmark. Small goals that lead to medium goals that lead to big goals. And, if you don't ever get past the small goals, it's okay. Readjust your goals and figure out what it is you want and move forward. And so
I made a list hoping that I don't make too many of those, reach too many of those goals, because it would be like a tremendously impacting my wallet.
Well, that's the mistake I made in 2022. Like I had X-Men 50 and Batman Adventures 12 on that list.
Ooh.
And with both of those, I'd hoped that they would drop off. Neither book did. Even when the market turned down. I mean, they've come down a little bit, but not a lot. And it's just one of those things where I learned, like, I'm gonna have to space it out more, right? Like Harley Quinn's one of my favorite characters. That X-Men 50 cover is just insanely gorgeous to me. It's my favorite X-Men cover from 2 to 100. 1 is still my favorite, but 2 to 100 is my favorite X-Men cover. And then 101 kind of becomes my next favorite cover after that. So it's just one of those books I have to have. But I mean, unless you go for like super low grade, like super low grade, to the point where the cover isn't even as beautiful as it once was, more, you're looking at a few $100s just for that book. Batman Adventures 12, I mean, you're looking for $500-600 for that book. I mean, we're talking like low grade, right? So
yeah,
it's just too expensive.
X-Men 1 at this point, I think, is one of those like grails where you can pretty much just write it off your list. It's gonna be one of those things like you're just gonna pay way too much for even the lowest grade book.
Yeah, and I'm okay with a 0.5. Like, as long as there's an intact cover, I'm okay with it. I don't care, because honestly, for the most part, I'm a low grade's better than no grade kind of guy, and a lot of my books are very low grade. That are in like my X-Men run, and I have like my childhood copy of First Gambit's like a 9.4. My first Mr. Sinister childhood copy is like a 9.6. I have a lot of like later stuff that's in high grade, but a lot of the earlier stuff, it's just not in good grade. Like I had a copy of like 41. I had a copy of 41 from, because it's part of the Origin of Cyclops storyline, and it's like a 2.5 or something like that, right? Like, it just was always in low grade ever since I got it, but I got it for a song back in like 1990,
Yeah. Well, I'm just even thinking of the scarcity of the book. X-Men, when it debuted, right? It was just one of those books that kind of was there in the Marvel realm of things. It didn't really heat up as a popular book till later. So in terms of what survived from the Silver Age that collectors have to buy and sell from is not much. So I mean, it's going to be one of those things. If it comes to market, like you said, even low grade, it's going to be highly sought after.
It's one of those things where I know where you're coming from, but I also think that X-Men 1 is a book that you can still, it's still possible. The problem is right now, think about the surefire MCU spec books, like the surefire ones. They're 100% guaranteed to pay off. Well, X-Men 1 is one of the very few that is definitely X-Men 1, Nova 1. We know Nova's coming, although we don't know how long Richard Rider will stick around. And then there's we know Star Fox is, Eros is coming.
Yeah.
There's a very few books that we know are slam dunks.
Yeah.
And that's one of them, but that's part of what's propping it up right now. There's a lot of copies out there, and to me, the biggest one out of the three that I'm looking for, that people put a huge premium on, I don't think they should, is Giant Size X-Men #1. It's a great book. It's great first appearances. There are tons of copies of that book out there, tons and tons of copies of that book, and most of them are still in relatively high grade.
Right.
It was massively printed, so.
And I'd rather have first Professor X, first Magneto, first Cyclops, first, Marvel Gold over Wolverine any day. I mean, Wolverine, Storm, they're great characters, right?
Yeah.
But if you talk about the hierarchy of X-Men characters, nothing beats X-Men 1. So that's the true grail. Like, I agree with you totally. Like, as great as, Giant Size is. And that's another book that's where you it's, in terms of pricing, it's a grail.
Yeah.
But X-Men 1 is definitely.
Absolutely. But, and I wonder about that. Like, there's a concept that I've been toying around with. If you really stop and think about it, there's two factors that I wish, I should probably talk about this in a video too. There's two factors that people forget about when it comes to comic book collecting. One of them is what's going on with all this MCU spec in the long run. Because look at some of the books where the characters have appeared, they're done, we know who they like. Do you really think the first appearance of Nebula is really going to continue to rise and rise and rise and rise over time? Or, you know, it's just kind of one of those interesting things where some of these books, you know, like I think what people kind of latched onto is Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal of Iron Man and Tony Stark. Specifically, it's iconic. It changed the way we look at comic books, comic book movies, and superheroes. And so that he had this huge effect on his first appearance, and that effect rippled and changed for all these other comic books. Now, I'm not saying like that's the first time we ever saw a comic book raised in value because of a movie appearance. That happened for other comic books too, but that's what took it to a whole nother level. And that was a 1 in a million thing. Like having somebody who had Robert Downey Jr.'s life and his experiences and his troubles in the past, his redemption, his comeback, coinciding with, you know, the biggest movie franchise in the world. That's a unique series of events. And, you know, X-Men will be great, but, you know, maybe it'll be great. A lot of the latest MCU stuff is really, really, really polarizing. But we've already had all the X-Men in movies. So, you know, I think that there's a chance, there's a chance that in 15, 20 years, people won't care as much as they care now about X-Men. I'm not going to say it's going to go down because we're going to continue to have inflation probably and all these things, but it may not like continue to just, you know, go on that trajectory where it's always worth more and more and more and more.
That's true.
And on top of that, guys, we're it for comic collectors. There's not young comic book collectors out there.
Yeah.
There's not new people getting into the hobby that like they were when we were younger.
That's a great point.
There's people that want to invest in comic books and they see the value there, but on a long enough timeline, like who's going to be around to care in 20 or 30 years?
We actually have someone in the chat who I think has X-Men #1. Silver Knight Kyle, can you confirm?
I think CJ has one too, though.
Yeah, I thought
CJ has an X-Men one.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I thought he does.
Yeah, CJ has one and Kyle has one.
Yeah, but just all the stuff that's going on with the way, like this whole wave 4 of the MCU has really, I think, kind of been a wake up call, along with the bubble bursting for comic book collecting. Although, you know, what people call bubble bursting, I kind of think of more of as like a correction back to the norm, like a regression to the norm, kind of, with a continued slight uptick in the market. A lot of books are sitting a little bit above where they were when we started, and a lot of books that didn't have as much value as they should have more value now, which is probably a positive correction for those books. See, CJ, you know, we need to talk. just kidding.
CJ's gonna give to you his X-Men one.
No. We've talked about, that's one of his runs. We talked about you know, he has some doubles and stuff later on that we talked about, maybe talking about seeing if we can find a new home for those. But I'm always working on the X-Men run, but man, it's an uphill struggle.
Yeah, it's incredible what some of our community members have, and you know.
Yeah,
CJ has one. Oh, okay. So Kyle does not have one.
Okay.
I think he had one. Didn't he show off?
I thought you picked one up. Oh, you know, you picked up giant size. You said, right? You picked up giant size.
Yeah, giant size one. Yeah, that giant.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's still, I mean, you know, like I said, that's part of my holy trinity of books. Now, to go back to your question, you asked me what my goals for this year are, and I would love to say that one of those books is on the list. They're not. There's no way. Like, unless I win the lottery.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's one of the whole game. Like, there would be signs if I won the lottery.
Or you walk into a Hollywood movie and it's just sitting in the basement of your attic from the previous owner or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, you know, dear Reddit, never thought it would happen to me. Look at this, you know, yard sale find kind of thing. The things I dream about. I've literally had daydreams about walking into a yard sale and finding like an ASM 300 or something, right? Like,
would you not feel guilty about going to yard sale, picking up X-Men #1 for $1
and not telling the old lady who's like saving up for her like cancer surgery?
You know, it's in that situation, yes, but in the standard situation, I actually, there's a lot of people that talk about this. I know, big respect to Chris over at Journos. He's done a few videos talking about like, maybe letting people realize that they have more here than they think they have. I think a lot of it depends on the context. If you have somebody like, I guess the way I look at it is I've walked into 100 antique stores that have, Exo Man of War #1 for $150 in beat up raw condition, right? There's a lot of people that price their stuff incorrectly both ways.
Yep.
Right.
And I'm not gonna necessarily like if somebody has obviously made some kind of an attempt, that's a different story than if somebody has made no attempt whatsoever to price their stuff. And like might generously tip them or give them more than they expect kind of thing. But I'm not going to feel like a huge amount of regret about that. But also, I don't think it's going to happen. Like that's the thing. Like not X-Men 1. I'm thinking more of like a smaller $100, $200 book or something like that. An X-Men 1, like it would be a different conversation, I'm sure.
If let's say I went to garage sale and saw a short box or not a short box. Let's just say it's just short box looking box has a whole bunch of comic in it.
Like a legal file box or something.
Hey, I don't want to look in there. Just give me that box for $20. Then I would feel totally fine. I don't want to look
at a short box of comics for $20. You're in a fantasy world.
No, I think
it happens for
$20. Not a short box.
It happens. But I mean, but also that can happen, and then you could get a bunch of coverless 80s books in there. Don't
knock the 80s. The 80s
I'm not knocking the 80s. I'm just saying, like, books that have no resale value and might be mothballed or moldy or whatever. You don't know.
Yeah. But...
All right. So plans for the channel now.
Yeah. So, and I mean, it's to kind of close the loop on the collecting plans, because I do have some goals, but I will be addressing that in a future video. As for the channel, the biggest things are, and have a good night, Preston. Thanks for popping in. I appreciate it. I hope to get out and get to more conventions. I'm trying really hard to get to Emerald City Comic Con.
Cool.
Originally,
yeah,
and that's definitely part of it. So we had that conversation about whether or not I was going, and I had a conversation with my wife, and we're gonna try to make it work. I don't want to like overpromise and have people hope I'm there or want to meet up or whatever. But I'm gonna try.
Awesome.
I'm gonna try to get to more conventions. It's tough. I'm still probably years away from getting to conventions outside of my region, and I live in the Pacific Northwest. So really, there's Emerald City Comic Con, there's Rose City Comic Con, there's Washington's Summer Con in Puyallup.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few, but yes, it is Cyclops in the Sentinel's hand. He's blasting the Sentinel. I wish I need to get. That's one channel goal I have. Better lighting and stuff for all this stuff is my next big goal for the presentation of my videos. Like I have stuff back there that I'm gonna rearrange all that stuff. People can't even see what's back there, so it's kind of pointless. I'm not getting an RV. Stop trying. I'm not Bueller 2.0. But getting out there and getting in the community a little bit more as much as I can. And then I had done a lot of content, and I'm going to continue to do the top 5 not to buy, and I'm going to continue to do the price, look backs, which to me is the other half of that coin. I have to do that stuff because if I can't just be out there hating on stuff and picking books not to buy and not do my due diligence and also say like, here's what actually happened. Like, was I right? Like, I have to follow that up. That's the way I look at it.
And you're right. I mean, you're right practically most of the time, right? So it's not like
there's been a handful of books that I think you probably would have been better. But like, let's say you went out and bought all of them, right?
Yeah,
man, doing that, like you unless you perfectly timed the top and you got in like right away, man, it would be rough. It would be really bad. So,
yep.
So as far as that goes, that's something I want to keep doing, but I also want to do more comic enjoyment content, right? Like, I've been rereading, or not rereading, but I've been reading through the Krakoa X-Men stuff, the most recent X-Men stuff, and I'm still behind. I'm kind of the last Hellfire Gala, kind of around that point. But I want to do a video that's kind of like a story so far, or how did the Krakoa era go, kind of a thing. Talk about more about comic content. I've tried to do the review thing. I love reviewing stuff, but it's never really taken off. But I might just do it just because. I try to stay relevant to what my viewers want, and if I see enough that they don't care, I really want to move away from that stuff. But for me, I think it'd be fun to do more review type content, more. What I always wanted to do was kind of like retrospectives on different storylines, like X-Men storylines. Like, I love the Age of Apocalypse. I think it's a kick-ass, fun 90s weird storyline, right? I'd love to go back and talk about that and kind of do a beat for beat of like what happened and the story so far, kind of thing. So those are kind of my big goals when it comes to the channel. And luckily I've had some things happen in my personal life. My wife has had some things happen in her personal life where I can focus more on upgrading some of the stuff, making it look a little more professional. Again, part of my goal with this whole thing was to try to keep getting better. And I know what's important is the content and getting content out more reliably, but I also want to like feel happy about the product I'm putting out, or the videos that people are watching, basically. So that's a big part of it.
Wonderful. And we're just so glad that again, let us know if you are coming up, because we're going to be there Sunday.
Yeah.
So we'd love to just meet up together, and we'll do our separate things or just hang out and do a video together, whatever works. But definitely want to hang out.
Sunday would be my preferred day, but it's looking like there's a chance I might be there on Saturday is the other thing.
Okay.
But to get the ability to meet up with people is worth me going, is essentially the way I look at it.
Right.
And I know there's gonna be some other people too. So it's always tough though, because technically it's a 4-day con. I don't think a lot of people are going on Thursday except for vendors probably, but missing those people stinks when it happens, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
So there are more opportunities. So I was talking to this with Sleepy Reader, Damien, who's down in Portland. And, we've had a sort of a small meetup here with Algorithm, myself.
You better not mess up, Comic Johnny. He's asking
and
for
what we talked about is forming our own little circle of Pacific Northwest sort of collectors, YouTubers, and just a community, just building that community here in terms of meetups, even comic book hall meetups, comic book hunt meetups.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I just want to say, if we don't connect this time at Emerald City, there are more opportunities to maybe for SummerCon or just for a random, comic book hunt near your area or somewhere in Tacoma, or maybe even all the way down Portland, because I know NammaN Young and I are planning to go down to Portland this summer to connect with Damien. So if we can all plan something, our schedules around that, we could definitely pick you up and do whatever.
Yeah, especially like I go down to Portland and hunt a couple times a year for sure. So it's funny because I live in the wasteland between Tacoma and Portland. There's nothing really. So I either go north or south. So I'm down to meet up. Scheduling, as long as that allows for it, I'm down.
Cool. I'm gonna take that wrench away if you leave people comment.
You don't want an anarchist, on your channel anyway. What's he gonna do? He's gonna point his hands at people.
CJ's meeting up with a bunch of people at Heroes Con soon, and he has one rule: don't take his photo. Or don't. Oh, sorry, you can take his photo, but you can't show his face.
Can't show his face.
Yeah. I'm gonna try to go to Heroes Con, but that depends on where we're going to. Emerald. Go see Sleepy and all that.
Yeah, you gotta budget. You gotta budget everything out.
Yeah, that's a lot of money on comics.
The funny thing is, when you talk about meeting up for the Northwest, there's so many of us here too.
Yeah,
that's true. Insane.
Yeah, like
especially in Portland. That's
Seattle too. Like you got
mecca of comic books right now. So
Yeah, well, I mean, and you know, Bueller's obviously from Portland is probably the biggest name from Portland, although he's never there now. But, you know,
Oh, I'm
he's
sorry
back.
to
I
hear
think
this.
he's
Is
back
this
right now. I
true?
think.
What you guys think this is true? Bronze Age at Bronze, I think that what's hard nowadays with collectors is not enough readers, and people go after mostly covers and grade them, but it's likely to each their own, I guess. But
yeah, I mean, you know, and by the way, Scott from Gamma Base is a good dude. Go follow them over on Facebook if you want to be part of a good selling group. But yeah, it's kind of true. It's like this weird system where I think it's fair to say that most readers are not extremely happy with the product that comes out of at least out of the big publishers. A lot of indies are doing a lot better. So I think that's part of it, but I also think there's a lot of factors that play into that, right? Like it's the same thing I think that kind of has given us weaker MCU movies. It's a lot of playing it safe, and it's a lot of what's going to give us the quick buck now versus payoff down the road. You know, I mean, how many times is Marvel going to relaunch, you know, Venom or you know, how many volumes of Spidey are we going to end up with? It's insane.
Yeah.
The variant covers, all that stuff, it all plays into it. And I think that's a big part of it. But yeah, like even if you had, you know, this whole cadre of readers coming in, I mean, think about what print runs were in the 60s and 70s. And you know, people love to like make fun of like the 8 million copies of X-Men 1 or the, you know, 6 million copies of Spawn number 1, and they should to a certain extent. But you know, you got to remember there were massive print runs back then because people were reading. You know, there were hundreds and hundreds of thousands of books put out for each issue of most of the big Marvel and DC books back in the day on a regular basis. And now, you know, what's a big print run? It's, I mean, like a big is in like not rare. I mean, 40,000, like it's not rare then, right? So it's insane. I mean, like in New Mutants 98, I think the print run for that was around, I think it was like between 500 and 750,000. I think maybe I'm wrong, but around then it would have been about that big, right? And that's New Mutants 98. It's not, you know, X-Men 1. And that was still extremely high by today's standards. So to sustain that, you know, you had people buying multiple copies. That was happening in the 90s, right? Now you still have people buying multiple copies, but they learned their lessons in the 90s and they're not really doing it the same way. So now what they're doing is they're buying multiple covers.
Well,
chasing that hot.
I also have an addendum to what you're saying.
Yeah.
Is if you're a younger reader and you go to the bookstore and you have your selection of manga, which is Japanese formatted comics, right? You have your selection of manga, or you have the latest thing from Marvel or DC coming out. It's no content really in terms of like entertainment value and bang for your buck. Manga has American comics beat by a billion miles. So
for sure,
if there's no adaptation in the American comic book market, it's not going to be able to compete with manga for future generations. So in that sense, it's going to die off.
Yeah, right? and it's kind of funny to me because I've known that for years, or that concept, right? Of like manga is just kicking American comics butts, and I'm not even a manga reader. Like I literally am struggling to get through Berserk right now, just because it's just a different thing for me, and I can see where people like it. I love the line work and all that, but it's just hard for me to get through it for some reason. But I still know that when I talk to anybody under the age of 30 that reads any kind of comic book style format, they're not reading. You know, they might pick up a trade of, you know, a certain storyline because it's been adapted or whatever. But think about it. Like if you watch Iron Man movies or you watch Captain America and you pick up a random cool cover trade Iron Man or Captain America story, you're probably going to be lost and not really what's going on a few pages into that. And then, you know, make it worse. Let's say when you jumped on, you're in the middle of an event and there's like 40 other issues you're supposed to read, and there's not like, you know, they're getting a little bit better with it, but there's no like clear cut like reading order or list. They're not released that way. Even in the freaking Marvel Unlimited app, where I read most of my comics digitally now, they did like the Axe Judgment storyline. There's a reading list for it, but when I click next, it doesn't take me to the next issue in the event. It takes me to the next issue of that series. Well, that's not the issue I'm trying to read. So I got to go back out. I got to find the next issue in the event, open that file. It's a pain in the butt. And manga, just like, you know, I know from what little I have read, is you just keep going.
Yeah. And it's not like it goes on forever. It's like 26 thicker volumes, right? 26 thicker volumes of books, and that's it. And they build, you know, television series, about 2 seasons or 3 seasons worth of television content off of it, and a movie. And that's the formula. And that's just regurgitated for every different whatever content there is. If it's popular enough to where, okay, let's do another comic book series, sometimes it gets to like, you get 2 volumes of a comic book series if it's popular enough. And that's what happened with Berserker, right? Berserker got several volumes. But I'm just saying, it's like a formula that's worked in Japan for many, many years. It's now dominating the American culture and market. And I love American comics, but, you know, the readership has matured. You know, the Stan Lee Ditko like books of past are not the things that people are going to be interested in. Unfortunately, you know, it's kind of like an era that's gone by the wayside. But I mean, if the industry wants to survive, it has to keep up with what if in terms of these legacy characters, it has to adapt the format to fit what these kids want. So
yeah, it's really strange. Like, I think a lot of us grew up reading, like, you know, the Watchmen, Dark Knight Returns era, you know, gritty, edgy comics, and that was like cool, and it was cool. You know, the Frank Miller, you know, Daredevil run, all these different things. It was kind of this really like grown up gritty feeling. And the problem with that is, and we're starting to see it with like shows like The Boys and all these different shows now too that are coming out that are kind of that dark version of heroes, is it doesn't really work if that's all you have. And so what happens then is you go and you look for the regular or the lighter version, and you go back to Stan Lee, and you go back to you know, Brubaker, and you go back to all these great runs, right? And you read those, and that's awesome. And then what do? You go forward and you read some of these modern runs, and there's some great stuff. There really is. But taken as a whole, there really isn't a lot of big, long runs that are really, truly great, that don't feel like filler, or like they're just trying to introduce new characters, or it's a short one and done story, and then the next artist or next writer isn't as good.
Right.
I do have one recommendation for new parents with the new kids. If you take away everything else, but if you concentrate on having those kids enjoy reading, that will do tremendous amount of. I mean, it will do a tremendous amount for their educational growth. Just teach them to read. Just teach them to enjoy reading, and that's, no matter what the topic might be.
Just don't give them bad comic books. There are a lot of bad comic books out there.
Give them whatever they like. That's my
just let them enjoy reading. Let them enjoy reading, and as a parent, if you read with them, then that would also help. That helps them too. So
it's good for everything. It's good for their development. It's fantastic. I love reading to my daughter, and I'm glad she enjoys it. Right, like there's part of me that was like, you know, she has TV, she has screens, is she even gonna care? She loves being read to, loves it. It's her favorite thing. So, Agu, to answer your question, I don't have an LCS, so I'm literally in that kind of a wasteland. I do have technically a shop that is within about 40 minutes of me. But if you ever watched my content, there's a shop I talk about where I got kicked out for using my cell phone.
Yeah.
And it's that shop. And so I don't go there.
Where is that shop?
I'm not gonna say I've chose not to reveal what shop that is because I think there's a really strong chance that the owner has a personal issue with me. He's a very this probably isn't the right word to use, and I'm sorry if this is the wrong term, but I think he's kind of bipolar, manic depressive, whatever the correct term is these days. And there were times that I would walk in that shop, and this is my childhood LCS. I was a customer there for 30 plus years. And I now have a long relationship with the guy. It used to be his dad's shop. Now he owns it. And sometimes I'd walk in and it would be like, hey man, how's it going? Here's your polls. I mean, it would just be sunshine and rainbows. Let's talk about the comic books. And he would like to complain a lot, whatever. That's fine. And then, we'd talk about that. And then I noticed he'd talk about other customers a lot and like what he didn't like about them. And it was kind of like, all right. Whenever you have that conversation with somebody, then you wonder, like, well, are you saying something about me when the next person walks in?
Yeah.
And I can also say that I know a lot of people have had bad experiences at that shop. Like I've mentioned that video to people who happen to know what store it is, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, that guy," and I don't go there anymore, and that kind of. So it's not just. I know it's not just me, but I feel like he might have been taking that out on me a little bit. And the funniest part about that is if you watch the video, the books I grabbed, and I confirmed what they were on Key Collector. I was looking at that app at the time. They're not expensive, but they're like $10 books, And I mean, I was buying them for $3 or $4. It's not like crazy.
Yeah.
And my argument still stands. It's like, if you have that, it's just like pricing at the register. If you have that feeling, go ahead and price your books.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are like I probably the nearest real comic shop, and a lot of people know Gabby's in Olympia. Been around for a long time. And then I Like Comics in Vancouver is the next, and they're the biggest shop in the Northwest by far. I mean, the guy has literally hundreds of thousands of comics in his basement that he's got. You walk in and he's got 10 X-Men ones and 20 giant size X-Men graded in a case. Like he's got it. He's got everything. He's got AF-15s.
Oh my goodness. All right, well, we got to go to Vancouver on our way down to Portland.
That shop is very much worth going to.
Is it priced fair or?
So this is typical to me, kind of like a successful LCS. It seems like most things there's a bit of a premium on, like he's charging probably, I guess what I would call, like, he doesn't want to be beat on fair market value on any bad day. Let's put it that way. Meaning like it's probably going to be 5 to 10% above FMV for like, multiple $1,000 books. But the best part about that shop is he takes any book that's worth $50 when he prices it, and he's a very good grader too. Like he has a grading sticker on the back of his books. It's pretty accurate from what I've seen and from what I've had graded from there. Any book that's $50 or more, he puts like kind of in a glass case where he puts together runs of books like the Infinity Gauntlet or whatever. But if it's $50 or less, he puts it in a 50% off bin.
Nice.
So if you find a book that's $50 and it's in the 50% off bin, you're buying a $50 book for $25.
Nice.
And he doesn't go back and reprice those books. So I found some serious gems in there.
All right.
I found a Wolverine 8 in like 9496 condition for $5.
Nice.
Stuff like that.
Yeah. Cool. Sounds like my kind of place.
Yes, buddy.
Right.
Buddy, that is the shop they have a very big presence at Rose City Comic Con. They also go to Emerald City as well. So yeah.
Cool.
All right, let's wrap things up. Chris, it was just great having you on. This was just a great conversation. And we're just going to look forward to engaging with you as we go forward, connecting with you, here live, hopefully in person. And we wish you all the best of luck moving forward.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. Hopefully you guys continue to have growth on your channels as well. I love what you guys do in the community. No joke. I was going around today, like trying to spread the word and trying to get people to come and check out your channel, at least, subscribe and bookmark. Love the interviews you guys have been doing. Just keep up the great work.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, Chris. And chat room, appreciate you guys coming by. Till next time, I guess.
Yeah. The one and only Bronze Age Nerd. All right. See you guys. We should have done the hey, 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 hey.